mentality of medical genocide. I mean, when you read Robert Lifton's book and Nazi Doctors, people, the psychology of medical killing and genocide, he makes it very clear. You cannot get your mind around this man. I mean, because he's a completely a demonic personality. I think that is one of the ways in which he's described it. So this level of evil, he's not split into different parts. This is a whole person invested in evil, and what he's doing, he believes what he's doing because he has the Nazi ideology. This is the way to lead the German people. He was like the avant-garde. He represents a person in the forefront who would help bring Germany to be the purest and the ruling race on planet Earth. He really believed this. And so it's hard for people that, I don't think any of us are normal until we get to heaven with Jesus, but whatever relative normalcy we have, I think this man is difficult. I don't think there's a way that you can even be comprehended.
And I wanted to add something else. And I was getting connected with all of this, a bunch of this, before I ever met you. For those that want to say this is a Doug Riggs phenomenon, you weren't even in my life. In fact, the first time I knew there was something there is somebody was playing a video, and it had Joseph Mengele on. All I saw was the boots, and I heard the whistling, and I went into a trance, and I couldn't walk. I was with this counselor, and I could hear people, but I couldn't move any part of my body.
Yeah.
And
you were triggered then.
I was triggered, and I didn't even know who it was. They didn't tell me. But they had a sense because of things I was sharing them about my grandpa and about my surrogate father and about different things. They sensed that, and I was describing certain things that I had been through. And so he had this video, and he didn't tell me who it was or anything. He just started playing it, and I went into this trance, and it took quite a while for them to get me back out of it.
Yeah, I remember that. And when Connie's referring to a trance, it's when you have dissociative states. When you're triggered, you drop into these areas that have been dissociated, and when you're in them, you're actually in the very event and the place that represents the individual that we're talking about in Mengele. I mean, it's just part of the process of reaccessing these areas of the mind and the history that have been dissociated. Before I go to, I'm not following, I gave you all a kind of a printout here, just kind of a general questionnaire, but before I go to, I wanted to look at question number 4, or point number 4. Before I do that, is different ones have been talking. Does anyone want to just come in and just share anything before I go on to something else? Anyone?
Not down here, Doug.
Okay, go ahead. Did you have something, Dan?
Well, I was thinking just to kind of, as I have had the memories I have and learned more about it and read about Mengele, and then and just which confirms so many of the facts that I had reported, and I had not at the time that I began having the memories, I was not aware of anyone having had reported Mengele, or even aware of really who he was at all. So the memories I have came myself, Just one thing that I've learned, which puts things for me in a better perspective, and that is the ideology behind what Mengele was doing. And I've read individuals who've said that his experiments were chaotic and had no scientific meaning whatsoever. And I heartily disagree with them, because I believe that when you look at what he was doing, he was experimenting with pain, and he was also experimenting with taking a person up to that point of death where he can bring him back. Much of what I've read about from the camps had to do simply with inflicting pain upon a person up to the point of death. That was as bizarre and as horrific that, I believe, was clearly what he was intending to do. His experimentation many of them had to do with different aspects of eugenics, but I think much of it had to do with inflicting pain in such a way as to slowly take a person up to a point of death and then be able to bring him back. Now,
when you say up to the point of death, actually into death.
Right. And now, to do that, you're going to take people into death and not be able to bring them back. That's all a part of the experimentation of how far. And also, of course, much of the eugenics with reference to twinning. That's why he was so interested in them. And I believe that from what I've read and then from the memories I've had, I believe he was fully invested in what he was doing because of what I call a New Age philosophy with reference to the belief of the fact that at the end of this physical life, the person can be released from the physical realm and translated into a spiritual realm or into a higher level. Yeah. I believe that he was working toward that which he thought, as many of them did. I believe Hitler himself, that's why he committed suicide, not because he was losing, but because he was coming to the point of the end of what they were attempting to do and ready to move, as they thought, to the next level, and that was being released from their body. And I know the memories around when King George VI was, the news accounts say that he died from a lung condition, complications, but I fully remember being involved in his ritual death.
Yes.
And he willingly submitted to it. Just like Mengele in 1979 willingly submitted to the ritual death. I think it's because of the ideology behind his life, as well as King George, and that is that coming to a point of the completion of the work here, therefore it's time to be released from this physical body and then released into that next level, the higher level of life.
Yeah. So you mentioned 1979. I don't remember how many people were there, but I remember when we first came across this years ago, there was I remember working with you people, and I don't remember specifically where you would intersect with this, Barbara, but over through the years, there was a very, very large ritual that took place in Tulsa in 1979 prior to the formation of our assembly, but there was something that happened in that context in 1979, which I think first began to unfold with Dan when he remembered being in Indiana, and I don't even know if he knew at the time about Mengele, but if it was the identity, but of this, the ritual killing of Mengele, where there were 13 representations of the ruling heads of what is often called the Illuminati. They were there. That he willingly submitted himself to the ritual murder that was executed by top 13 representatives of the Illuminati. That you were there, Dan. You remember that. I don't know of Connie, Sally. I think some of you. But any comment on that event and what the purpose of that was? And let me just say this: the official report is that he died of drowning, of a heart attack while swimming in 1979. That's the report. Although there was a rumor that he had been murdered, but they have no way. That's all that comes out. And then when they exhumed his bones in 1983, they identified his remains, is what the report is. But I believe the corroborative testimony that in his death there was a purpose and something was released that has affected all of us as an assembly through the years during that event in 1979. So let's talk about that a little bit in terms of how he really died. So Dan, why don't you just lead, and if anyone wants to follow up with what you remember this event, go ahead. But why don't you just lead? Just go ahead, and you've already alluded to it, Dan. But go ahead and just talk about it. If you
well, actually, I was in the military, and I was stationed at Fort Benjamin Harrison, Indiana, for a period of time for schooling. And I remember it was a Sunday morning. I believe it was in August. That I got up to run, and it was fairly early, and there was a particular route that I went, and this particular morning, when I turned down a kind of a trail, it was particularly dark, and I could barely see. I remember afterwards, in my mind, just finishing the race, and then really being afraid to the point of trembling. and think, well, I'm not going to do that again.
Because you didn't remember at the time what
No,
the fear
I
was
just
about.
remember. Okay, yeah, I got through that trail. I couldn't see anything. The darkness was so dark, but I do remember kind of trembling when I got back, thinking, I'm not going to go that route again. And
that's all you remembered at the time.
that's right. Yeah, I had no memories. But years later, whenever whenever I began to when the memories began to surface, and I began. And it takes a little bit to put all this together. But literally, as the memory I have it now, as I'm running down that road, Mengele came out of the shadows. Of course, he's not the same Mengele from 18 months. He's older, and he had a mustache at the time, but it was still him. He came out of the shadows, and he had something in his hand that he held out toward me. And as he did, then these 13 individuals came out in a semicircle behind him, and then there was just great darkness all around, as far as I could tell, around behind that. But he held out his hand, and in his hand, what I saw was like little light bodies, luminaries. It was almost like a small universe, and I put the word to it, the morning star. It was like he was holding out to me the morning star, and as he's holding it out, and it's like it is a living thing that fits in his hands. And as he's holding it out, then these 13 all raise their daggers. He's facing me, but it's like he knows what's happening. They raise their daggers, and they all, just at the same time, strike him with them. And it's like, because there's something in me that is connected.
You're bonded to him.
Right, affectionately from back at 18 months forward. It's as if, and part of what the programming for me was that I would extend myself out, as if I could extend myself out over individuals to protect them. The deception on my part was that I could extend myself out over someone and cover them in a non-physical way and protect him. And so this is happening. He's there, and it's as if I throw myself out over him in a sense to try and protect him. But of course, I didn't protect him. But it's all that he had, and identified with him in a spiritual way. It's as if I took it all into myself. The thing that I'm trying to do is to save him. It's like a knee-jerk reaction. I'm not a child anymore, but in that dissociated state, seeing the harm coming to him, and just extending myself out over and trying to pull him into myself in a protective way. But in doing that, it's like I took into myself the morning star, that celestial-looking representation that I could see in his hand.
And do you think that in the release of his death, that there was some kind of a release of that least which represented him, and you took into yourself the angel of death as kind of a wrapping around that which would represent, as we've talked about before, the end-time morning star? It was to be a wrapping of death around that which would ultimately, 2 Peter 1, verse 19, the release and the emergence of the morning star in these last days. Did you kind of see that was kind of the setup for you to kind of represent a wrapping and the surrounding of that which was yet to be, morning star testimony wrapped in death?
Oh, yeah. If we go back to 18 months and everything leading up to 15 to 18 months period, I mean, the ritual activity that I most remember is just being put into death and brought back, put into death and brought back, so that years later, as I would try to work through this, all I could see would be fragmentation, dust. I felt like my life was dust. All that I was in a spiritual way was just represented in dust. I didn't do anything with Mengele, or, as some of the girls talked about, having, jobs and different things like that. I just was taken into death and brought back, taken into death. And each time there's a shattering, a shattering, a shattering. And then the whole, at that young age, the representation of the need that was presented to me from the book of the Gospel of John was that I to be the friend of Jesus, I needed to